Hey, Dr. Von Duke here with a quick and dirty for rubric number 15 from the EdTPA Special Education portfolio. So rubric 15 answers the final question on the task 3 commentary, which is the assessment commentary, which is question 4. And again, this is the Special Education EdTPA portfolio. And what's the guiding question for rubric 15? What are you really answering? Well, they're asking you what instructional sequence should you follow after this unit, the one that you just taught for the EdTPA, to extend it and meet your students' remaining needs in relationship to it, whether those are a need for reinforcement, challenge, or next concepts. And then conveniently, rubric 15 relates to many other rubrics that you've already taken careful time to fulfill. So essentially what you're doing is gathering the information from these rubrics, and then you're putting it together in a way to create next steps. But you need all of this sort of as evidence for why you're going to do the next steps you're going to do. So in rubric 1, of course, you had your measurable outcomes and your learning objectives. So that tells you what this unit is about in order to move beyond it. Rubric 9 asks you about how you met your students' needs, how did you scaffold to their strength. In rubric 10, that's the one I couldn't think of before, rubric 10 asks you to look up research related to your students' needs and strengths, so that's going to come into play here. Rubric 11 asks you how did they perform on assessments, and again, this will be very important to draw on here. I think I told you that there. What instructional supports or strategies did you provide that scaffolded to your students' strengths or supported them in their needs as they took those assessments, or that enabled them, maybe you did those things throughout the course of your teaching, and it enabled them to perform better on the assessments than they had perhaps on the baseline. And then rubric 12 asks, what specific feedback did you give related to the needs or strengths? And the reason why that's important is maybe you provided a strategy there for them as feedback, but now you want to take that strategy or that bit of advice and reinforce it in a next step. So I'm Dr. Von Duke. I provide this information freely and on this channel in order to support you as you're going through this ambiguous portfolio while you might be in a very stress-related student teaching or first year of teaching, and just to kind of lessen the mental load placed on you given all the other responsibilities you have at this time in your life. So back to how to answer this particular question. All right, so here's the strategy in a nutshell. Consider your lesson objectives, tasks, and activities, your supports, your materials, the strategies you taught. Of those, what does the student still need? What do they need to do next? What instructional strategies then have you done that you should continue? What didn't work and you might want to change, or what they need to up the challenge or teach the next conceptual step? Now, this question focuses on needs, but extending the strengths can be written up as a need. So they have a need for the next step, and so you're going to take their strength as evidenced by blah, 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 and scaffold to it to get to that concept. So, but because you were asked about needs and strength in so many other rubrics and you probably got hyper focused on it, just realize that you're only extending to a need, whether it's a strength expressed as a need or a need. You do not need to have both for this rubric. Then you're going to be asked what research connects to the focused learner's needs and your next instructional steps. So that really involves you going to scholar.google and you put in your focused learner's need, their grade level, maybe special education, and the curriculum that you're focused on. And then look there. You can also go back to rubric 10 where you were also looking at research and see if any of that research extended to possible next steps, since you already have that in pocket. Don't forget, you can also go to worldcat.org and plug in that title and it'll convert a reference for you into APA format. And you don't need that, you don't get scored on that, but it is more professional looking, and you do want to put those references at the end to show that you have legit, good, solid research theory connection. And then for a 5, you would add what next steps would change the current IEP or the current curricular goals for the student. So basically there's a current plan, but if they're going to move forward, you're going to make some suggestions to change the accommodations, the modifications, or the conceptual ideas moving from where you are. All right. Another thing I wanted to say in here is just that when you strategize to answer this question, you me see if I put it in there. I did not. When you strategize to answer this question, realize that the research components are this. If you look at the rubric, they're the second part. So there's a 3A and a 3B, a 4A and a 4B. So to get to a 4, you have to do a general connection to research, a 3B. But that also can solidify sort of a weak 3A. So, you know, consider that even if you don't have evidence for a 4 or aren't able to answer that for whatever reason, then answer the research part as well. And also for a 5, you would have to add very specific research to your next steps, but it can solidify your 5. Another thing that you'll be asked to do that's on the rubric, but it's not necessarily obvious from what I have here. 1B in the commentary asks you, I think it's 1B, or this, no, the second part of 1A in the commentary asks you, what's the logical sequence? So not only what next steps will you take, but what order of those next steps will you take and why? What's the logic behind the sequence that you chose? Now, what's important to consider there is you might have one need that shows up in all 3 objectives, and that gives you 3 different steps. Or you could have one need that shows up just in one objective, or it's maybe multi-steps to that need, or maybe there's multiple needs within that objective. So it's not important that you have more than one need or more than one objective, but you might need to go to more than one need or more than one objective in order to pull enough steps so that you have something to sequence. So just wanted to add that. So a quick commercial here. As I said, the mental burden may be fine for you. You may be completely up to this challenge. 72% of the 18,000 people who take the EdTPA each year pass it. But there's probably, that means there's a fair amount that aren't passing it, and it also means that there's probably a fair amount of people who are intimidated by it and not taking it. That should be, because of course it affects your salary if you're in a state that requires it. So I'm here to help. If